The prepper industry wants you buying $350 freeze-dried buckets. That's a scam built on fear, not logistics. Military Sustainment Doctrine, FM40, treats supply as a math problem. Calories per dollar per shelf year. That equation changes everything about how you shop. One item on this list costs under $5 and covers a single person for 6 to 8 years. Another one doubles as a wound dressing pulled straight from combat medic protocol. 8 items, all from Costco, all under $200 total, built on the same logistics framework that sustains forward operating bases. Most people walk past these every trip. After this, you won't. Kirkland Long Grain White Rice, 50-pound bag, $18 to $22. That's your caloric foundation, 82,000 calories in one bag. Let that number land. 82,000. That's 41 days of subsistence for one adult. One bag. One purchase. Military sustainment planning builds outward from simple carbohydrates. There's a reason for that. Calorie dense. Near zero prep complexity. Pairs with any protein or fat you've got on hand. You boil water. You eat. That's the entire logistics chain. Now here's where your math has to get ruthless. That freeze-dried bucket the prepper industry pushes? $350. It delivers roughly 30,000 calories. The rice gives you nearly triple that caloric volume. At 1/15 the price. You're not buying survival food. You're buying marketing with a 20-year shelf life label slapped on cardboard. Storage is where most people fumble. You take that 50-pound bag and you repack it. 5-gallon food-grade buckets. Mylar bags inside. Oxygen absorbers dropped in before you seal. That's it. Shelf life hits 10 to 12 years. No rotation headaches. No checking expiration dates every season. You seal it once and forget it exists until you need it. The failure mode for most civilian stockpiles is the same every time. They buy expensive, they buy small, and they run out of calories in 2 weeks while convincing themselves they're prepared. Rice doesn't care about your opinion of it. It just solves the math. 82,000 calories. $20. That's your baseline. Everything else on this list builds on top of it. Running total. $22. I've put together a full guide on crisis supply logistics covering everything you need to know, and it's the first link in the description. Kirkland Honey. 5-pound jug. $12. Infinite shelf life. That's not marketing language. Archaeologists have pulled edible honey from 3,000-year-old Egyptian tombs. The chemistry doesn't change. Low moisture content. Acidic pH. It doesn't spoil. Ever. 77 calories per tablespoon gives you a clean supplemental energy source that outlasts every other food item in your stockpile. But here's the pivot most people miss entirely. Military field medics have documented honey as a topical wound dressing in austere conditions. When you're cut off from clinics and pharmacies, wound infection is what kills you, not the wound itself. Honey's antibacterial properties come from 3 mechanisms. Low moisture pulls bacteria dry. Acidic pH inhibits growth. Natural hydrogen peroxide production handles what's left. You spread it directly on a wound and cover it. That's a shelf-stable antiseptic sitting in the baking aisle. So count the functions. Caloric supplement. Wound care. Morale item when everything else tastes like survival. Barter commodity when your neighbor has rice but no sugar source. 4 functions. One $12 jug. Most people walk past it reaching for protein bars with a 6-month shelf life. You won't make that mistake. Running total, $34. Costco Pharmacy. Bulk over-the-counter medications. This is where the video corrects the single biggest civilian instinct error in emergency preparedness. Walk into any prepper forum. You'll see tourniquets, chest seals, hemostatic gauze, trauma gear stacked to the ceiling, and almost nobody has a $5 bottle of anti-diarrheal medication. Combat medic training, 68 Whiskey Mose, identifies the actual killers in prolonged, austere environments. Not traumatic hemorrhage, dehydration, GI illness, infection from minor wounds, allergic reaction. Those are your threat priorities in order. A $5 bottle of loperamide is the difference between manageable illness and fatal dehydration when there's no clinic open and no IV fluids available. Ibuprofen, 500 count bottle, manages pain, reduces inflammation, controls fever. Diphenhydramine, allergic reactions can escalate to anaphylaxis. Without intervention, that's a fatality in an environment where you can't call anyone. Electrolyte powder. Your body loses sodium and potassium through sweat, vomiting, diarrhea. You can't drink your way out of electrolyte depletion with plain water. You need the salts. Costco sells these in 500 to 1,000 count bottles at 60 to 80% below drugstore pricing. You're looking at $8 to $15 per medication. While most people are buying one 30-count blister pack of ibuprofen for $9 at the pharmacy, you're buying 500 doses for the same price. The failure mode here is theatrical. People stockpile gear that treats the rarest emergency and ignore the medications that treat the most common ones. GI illness alone accounts for more incapacitation in field environments than gunshot wounds. That's not opinion. That's documented in every conflict of the past 30 years. Stock the boring stuff first. The exciting trauma gear is useless if you're too dehydrated to stand. Running total, $60. Kirkland Coconut Oil, 84-ounce jar, $12 to $15. This is the caloric density play that most civilian stockpiles get catastrophically wrong. Fat contains 9 calories per gram. Protein and carbohydrates contain 4. That's not a minor difference. That's more than double the energy per unit of weight. 120 calories per tablespoon. You can add 2 tablespoons to rice and jump a meal from 200 to 440 calories without adding volume. Your body needs fat. Not wants it. Needs it. Military field nutrition guidance prioritizes fat intake for sustained thermal energy in cold weather and high exertion scenarios. Without adequate fat, your body cannibalizes muscle tissue for energy. You get weaker every day. Most stockpiles are built around carbs and protein. Rice, beans, canned meat. Nobody thinks about fat. That's a critical gap that shows up around week 2. You start losing energy. Cognitive function drops. Cold tolerance disappears. You're eating enough volume, but starving at the cellular level. Coconut oil fills that gap. Now stack the functions. Fire accelerant. A cotton ball soaked in coconut oil burns for several minutes. Skin protectant in dry, cold, or windy conditions. Tool lubricant for hinges, blades, and zippers. Improvised candle base with a cotton wick. One of the highest caloric efficiency per dollar items in the entire warehouse, and it does 4 other jobs on top of feeding you. Running total, $75. Bulk table salt. 25-pound bag, under $5. This is the item that covers a single person for 6 to 8 years at minimum intake levels. 500 milligrams per day. That's what your body requires for nerve function and muscle contraction. Requirements spike hard with exertion and heat. You're sweating in a grid-down scenario doing manual labor. Your sodium demand doubles or triples. But salt does more than feed you. It preserves food. Curing and brining are the dominant methods of meat preservation for most of recorded human history. Before refrigeration, salt was the technology. It's still taught in military survival courses. You harvest or trade for protein, you salt it, you store it. That's the chain. Here's the pattern that repeats in every documented prolonged disruption. Salt starts as a commodity nobody thinks about. Within weeks, it transitions to a critical resource. People with meat can't store it. People without salt watch protein rot. The word salary comes from the Latin salarium. Roman soldiers received salt rations as part of their compensation. When civilization runs long enough, we forget what was once worth paying soldiers with. Under $5. 6 to 8 years of supply. Food preservation capability, electrolyte replacement. The best cost per year ratio on this entire list by an order of magnitude. Running total, $80. Kirkland plastic wrap and heavy-duty aluminum foil, under $15 combined. This is the pure military knowledge reveal. This is the item that separates this list from every civilian prepper list on the internet. Plastic wrap is taught in Tactical Combat Casualty Care, TCCC, as an improvised occlusive dressing. Penetrating chest wound. Air entering the pleural cavity. Lung collapses. You need an airtight seal. Dedicated chest seals cost $15 to $25 each and expire. Plastic wrap costs $4 and covers dozens of applications. You tear a piece larger than the wound. You tape 3 sides. You leave one side open as a flutter valve. That's field medicine with a kitchen supply. No civilian prepper list includes cling wrap as a medical supply. Not one. Because civilians buy based on product categories. Medical goes in the medical kit. Kitchen goes in the kitchen. Trained operators buy based on function. If it seals airtight, it's a medical tool. Period. Aluminum foil. Signal reflector. You can flash sunlight for miles with a flat sheet. Heat reflector for improvised shelter. Line the interior surface facing your body and you reflect radiant heat back toward yourself. Cooking vessel. Shape it into a container and you can boil water directly over coals. Faraday cage component for small electronics. Wrap a radio or GPS unit in multiple layers and you've shielded it from electromagnetic pulse. One roll does all of that. Most people buy these every month and never once consider them as survival tools. That gap between civilian habit and trained perspective is the entire point of this list. Running total, $95. Pay attention to this one. This is the perspective shift. Kirkland Vodka, 1.75-liter bottle, $20, 40% ethanol, 80 proof. Your first instinct is wrong. Throw it away. This is not about drinking. Wound disinfectant. Ethanol above 40% concentration kills bacteria on contact. When your pharmacy supply runs low and you can't restock, this bottle is your antiseptic reserve. Solvent. Strips adhesive. Cleans surfaces. Degreases tools. Fire starter. Ethanol ignites reliably at room temperature with a spark. A small pour on damp tinder solves your ignition problem. Tincture base. Herbalists and field medics use high-proof alcohol to extract medicinal compounds from plants. Indefinite shelf life means it sits on your shelf for years without degrading. But here's where the real knowledge lives. In every documented prolonged collapse, alcohol becomes a dominant barter commodity. During the siege of Sarajevo, alcohol ranked in the top 3 traded goods alongside cigarettes and batteries. People will trade food, labor, and critical supplies for alcohol. That's not a moral judgment. That's a documented economic reality in every conflict zone and disaster scenario studied. $20 buys you a wound disinfectant, a solvent, a fire starter, a tincture base, and the single most historically reliable trade commodity in crisis economies. Party supply becomes pharmacy, fuel source, and currency. One bottle. Indefinite shelf life. No other item on this list covers that many functions across that many categories. Running total, $115. Kirkland AA and AA batteries, 72 count packs, $20 to $25 per pack. 10-year shelf life. Military Logistics classifies batteries as Class II supply with priority allocation. Communications, navigation, and illumination depend entirely on portable power. When the grid drops, batteries become the bridge between functioning and blind. Here's the consumption math most people get wrong. Without grid power, you burn through 4 to 8 batteries per day. Flashlights, headlamps, AM/FM radio for emergency broadcasts, small devices, weather radio. That's not heavy use. That's baseline function. A 72-count pack lasts 9 to 18 days at that rate. You need 2 to 3 packs, minimum. 200 to 216 batteries. 30 to 60 days of coverage. During Hurricane Maria, batteries vanished from retail within hours, not days. Hours. They became top-tier barter items within the first week. People with batteries had light, communication, and navigation. People without sat in the dark guessing what was happening. That's not a metaphor. That's the documented reality across multiple parishes and municipalities. Most civilians buy a pack of 8 and call it done. That covers 2 days. You need to think in multiples of 72. Costco's pricing gives you 200 to 300 batteries for under $100. No other retailer comes close to that cost per unit at this volume. Running total: $165. 8 items, under $200. Built on the same classes of supply logic, Class 1 subsistence, Class 8 medical, that the Defense Logistics Agency uses to run the largest supply chain on Earth. The veteran advantage isn't gear, it's seeing a forward operating base supply depot where everyone else sees a Saturday grocery run. I've written up a complete guide covering the logistics framework behind all of this. First link in the description. So what's the one item on this list you'd grab first?